Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday the 13th. Steve, you're looking great. We're pleased to have you here with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Warren, our OIR spokes from Baghdad. Over to you, sir.
Thanks, Jeff, and good morning, Pentagon Press Corps. It's always good to be with you on a Friday. Today, I'm going to provide you a short operational update across the battlefield, and as well as some bigger picture items. So, first of all, we welcome the Belgian announcement today that they will extend strikes into Syria. The additional combat power will help us more rapidly defeat our enemy. Now, ISIL's so-called caliphate relies on their ability to act like a state. Fact of the matter is they can't do it. One of the reasons they can't do it is that we've put a dent in their pocketbook. We have two operations targeting ISIL finances. One is called Operation Point Blank, which aims to destroy the Daesh cash piles that we find. The other is Tidal Wave 2, which focuses on their oil revenue. These operations have had an impact. We know that ISIL's total income has been reduced substantially, and we know that their income from oil specifically has, we believe, been reduced by about 50%. Their primary source of income is what they refer to now as taxation. In reality, we know that it's extortion. But even their ability to extort money from their own people continues to be reduced as our partner forces liberate more and more territory. In addition to choking off their funding, we are now seeing a reduction in the flow of foreign fighters onto the battlefield. Over the last year, we assessed that the number of foreign fighters entering the combat zone each month has decreased, possibly by as much as 75%. ISIL has been unable to deliver on its promise to create a functioning state. That has diminished the appeal of the so-called caliphate as a destination spot for foreign fighters. As a result, we assess that ISIL is no longer able to replenish its ranks at the rate its fighters are dying on the ground. We attribute the reduction in foreign fighter flow to a range of factors, including our military gains on the ground, as well as active steps by governments to strengthen and enforce border security and also counter recruitment efforts. Now let's talk about what our partners are doing on the ground. In Anbar, as part of Operation Desert Lynx, Iraqi security forces have advanced to the outskirts of the town of Juba, which is a town 25 miles north of Heat along the Euphrates River. In that action, the 7th Division, along with Sunni tribal fighters from the Ubaidi, Mahal, and Jughaifi tribes, are conducting offensive operations to liberate that town. Near Makmur in the Tigris River Valley, Operation Valley Wolf saw some success this week as well. The 72nd Brigade seized the village of Kabruk. Coalition-trained Sunni tribal fighters from the Jabori, Lahibi, and Sabawi tribes established a blocking position to the south, while the 72nd Brigade attacked from the north. Coalition conducted multiple strikes and killed 52 enemy fighters during that operation. Since then, operations there have focused on secondary clearance in and around Kabruk and the continued improvement of defensive positions. In Syria, operations around Shaddadi have been static, and the Mora line remains contested, with opposition forces ceding 2 villages this week. Near Tanf, which is in the tri-border area, kind of in the south by where Syria, Iraq, and Jordan come together, opposition forces continue to improve their defenses, and they're preparing for future operations there. We've conducted this week 40 strikes in that area against ISIL headquarters, staging facilities, and fighting positions. And we're going to continue to apply pressure against ISIL's critical capabilities and functions. By keeping the pressure on in that southern region, it causes ISIL to have yet another problem that they've got to solve. Well, this concludes my prepared comments, and without any further ado, we'll take your questions.
Barbara Starr.
Colonel Warren, a couple of things. Starting in Baghdad, what's, given now you've had several days of attacks in Baghdad and around Baghdad. What's your assessment there of what ISIS is trying to accomplish and the destabilization it could pose to the Iraqi government?
Well, certainly our hearts are broken for the almost 100 Iraqi citizens who were killed or wounded, severely wounded in these recent attacks. These are attacks that ISIL has claimed responsibility for. We know that Baghdad is a huge city. It's a city of over 6 million people, and it is not a city that can simply be zipped up and completely sealed off. So tragically, the enemy is going to be able to get some truck bombs into the city from time to time. These were probably opportunity targets, I think. Certainly there has been some unrest, some political churn, I think, here in Baghdad over the past several weeks. And ISIL, while we believe they're on the defensive and they are back on their heels, they still remain a legitimate threat. They're a dangerous enemy, and they're also smart. And so, they've seen an opportunity here to create discord, to create disharmony. These strikes went straight into, in many cases, heavily populated Shia areas, and really focused on civilian women, children, complete civilians, not in any way, shape, or form someone that could be considered a combatant or even a threat to ISIL in any way. And this was obviously the purpose of this was to create discord. It was also an opportunity for this enemy, I think, to gain some international attention. They have lost ground almost continuously now for half a year. They've been really taking a beating, particularly in Iraq, where we've seen them lose city after city. We've seen them lose region after region. We've seen them lose their money. We've seen them lose their leaders. We've seen them lose their towns and villages and territory. So I think they want to try and make a statement, and they know that these very high visibility attacks get attention. And so I think that's also what they were looking to do.
If I may, two things. Can you bring us up to date on the status of additional U.S. forces that had been announced for deployment, for authorization to go into Iraq, and the status of the Apaches, the status of the additional trainers going in? And your map talks about pressuring and isolating Raqqa. What do you see going on in Raqqa? There's talk that ISIS has declared an emergency there. They're covering up things. They're moving people. What do you see happening in Raqqa? And bring us up to date on the status of U.S. forces.
Right. So the Secretary did announce an additional 217 personnel to come to Iraq and serve as in various parts of different accelerants. Those personnel are still flowing. I don't have the exact number of how many have come in yet. None of those accelerants have begun to take place yet, though. So we're still conducting advise and assist at the division and operational center level, and we have not yet employed the Apaches in an offensive role. So that's still working. It does take time to get personnel trained and equipped and packed and moved. So that's ongoing. In Raqqa, we have seen this declaration of emergency in Raqqa, whatever that means. We know this enemy feels threatened, as they should. I've detailed all the strikes that we've done there over time. They see the Syrian Democratic Forces, along with the Syrian Arab Coalition, maneuver both to their east and to their west. To the west, in the Tishreen Dam, to the east, Shadadi. Both of these areas becoming increasingly secure, and the Syrian Democratic Forces increasingly able to to generate their own combat power in those areas. So certainly we are seeing some reactions to this. We've had reports of ISIL repositioning both their combat capabilities against what they think may be coming next, and we've seen reports of them repositioning personnel to various other, either within the city or even out of the city. So rightfully, ISIL understands that their days are increasingly numbered. We are going to continue to keep this pressure on them, and we expect to see them collapse eventually.
Okay, did you have a quick follow-up, Kevin?
Yeah, Colonel Kevin Barron, how are you doing? Just two follow-ups. One, is this a case of you being so focused on the north and the offensives to come that you guys didn't keep your eye on the back door, these massive attacks in Baghdad? I mean, because ISIS declared openly these are retaliatory actions that were for what they're feeling. And what are you going to do about Baghdad? You described the problem, but what's next? I mean, the American people remember U.S.-led forces patrolling every street in that town. I know you say you can't zipper it up, but surely there's more that could be done.
Well, our focus right now is really on training and equipping the Iraqi security forces and on providing air power in the field. The Iraqi security forces have a plan to continue to secure Baghdad, and they're going to execute that plan. There were fairly good efforts around the Green Zone last week when they believed that there was going to be an increase in protests. Those efforts, what caused the demonstrations to not happen? I don't know, but they certainly snapped into action and created good security here. And I think they're going to continue to do that. The Iraqi security forces understand that they have to protect their people, and that's what they're trying to do. Specifically, what's the U.S. The CJTF is not involved in the defense of Baghdad.
Tara Kopp.
Warren, has the political instability and the increasing violence in Baghdad impacted U.S. plans to send in these additional operators and the Apaches? Are there any concerns that by increasing the U.S. footprint, it might actually incite further instability due to kind of a long-standing unwillingness by some parties in Iraq to not have a U.S. presence there?
No, not at all, Tara. Our plans to flow in the additional accelerants remain on track. We do not believe that any of this recent, whether it be ISIL-initiated bombings or the political churn that's taking place or the demonstrations that we've seen, are going to impact our ability to flow these additional forces in and get them into position to assist the Iraqi security forces in their effort to prepare for and eventually liberate Mosul. So no impact.
While it may not impact U.S. ability to flow in forces, have you seen any impact on the political will to have U.S. boots on the ground there?
Tara, say that again. Have we seen any impact on what now?
Iraq's political will to have additional U.S. forces there.
No, we have not seen the current churn impact this government's desire to have U.S. and coalition support in their fight against ISIL. We haven't seen that at all. The Prime Minister welcomed the announcement that the Secretary of Defense made several weeks ago, and that remains.
Next to Jim Miklaszewski.
Steve, to follow up on that, are there any indications, or at least concerns on the part of the U.S. military in Baghdad, that the Iraqi government, if these kinds of attacks, these suicide bombing attacks, continue in Baghdad, that the Iraqi government, the Iraqi military, may lose its resolve and withdraws many of their troops from the fight against ISIS and bring them back into Baghdad for protection?
Well, right now, more than 50% of the Iraqi security forces are committed to the defense of Baghdad, and we have advised the Iraqis that that's enough. So certainly, it's something we've got to watch out for. But right now, we've continued to advise them that their focus needs to remain on defeating this enemy once and for all, thereby eliminating the threat completely.
And you said CJTF is not involved in the protection of Baghdad, but when these kinds of suicide attacks occurred, when the U.S. military was present, General Petraeus lined many of the streets and neighborhoods with those giant Texas T-walls and pretty much isolated the threat and reduced the threat significantly. Is the U.S. at least working with the Iraqi government and military in an effort to provide or at least give them guidance on the kinds of defenses that may be needed there in Baghdad?
Well, certainly we have advisors in the Baghdad Operations Center, and so these are the types of things that get discussed. But the Iraqis really do have, their plan for how to secure their capital city. We are certainly available to provide them advice. We do interact with them in the Baghdad Operations Center every day. I am not going to share with you what their plan is, obviously, but they do have a plan to continue the security of Baghdad, and we'll continue to work with them and provide them whatever assistance that we can provide. And it's notable that even when there were 150,000 American forces here and T-walls lined every street, we were never able to completely drive the threat to zero. Like I said, this is a big city, over 6 million population, and it's not even feasible to think that you could completely stop individuals who are determined to cause harm.
Any indication of any growing pressure from the Shia elements, even Iran perhaps, that there has to be more focus now on protecting Baghdad against these attacks, primarily against Shia neighborhoods?
I've seen no indication of that, Jim. Obviously, the Iraqi government has its own discussions, but we have not yet seen any indication of that.
Next to Phil Stewart.
Hi, Steve. A quick follow-up on what Jim was asking, and then I have a question about the Manbij pocket in the north. First, on the defense of Baghdad, I mean, if the Iraqis keep about half of their forces in Baghdad because of this threat, because of the pressure to defend against this threat, will that slow your plans to go after Mosul? And secondly, on the Manbij pocket, if you could give us an update on where that stands. ISIL have made some gains across a series of towns, I think it was last week or the week before. Where does that stand now? What's the state of play? Thanks.
Well, the plan to move towards Mosul takes into account the fact that 50% of the Iraqi security forces are in Baghdad. So assuming this situation remains the same, there will be no impact. The Iraqi government, of course, can move units and forces around the battlefield as it sees fit. Should they decide to reposition forces into Baghdad, then that's something that would have to, that would cause a change. But as of now, the plan accounts for the Baghdad security effort. No real, like I said in my opening remarks, there opposition forces did lose 2 small villages this week up along the Mara line to an ISIL attack, and so that remains, as I've described it previously, really a shoving match. What you see is a number of really small villages along that line that we refer, that begins in Mara and moves up to the Turkish border there. And these villages are changing hands, almost daily in some cases. Some of these villages have changed hands a half a dozen times in the last few months. So it really is a shoving match where one force will occupy a town, sometimes unopposed, sometimes with some opposition, sometimes in a larger fight. But it's really become a continuous back and forth of these small villages with neither side appearing to gain the upper hand or appearing to lose the upper hand. So we'll have to see how this develops.
Okay, next to Andrew. Oh, there you are, Andrew Tillman.
Colonel Warren, I'd like to ask a little bit about the troop levels, and you talked about troops flowing in, but a couple of weeks ago, the Secretary raised the cap from about 3,800 to more than 4,000, but it's my understanding that the actual official number of troops on the ground has been about 3,500 for most of that time. Is that, can you help us understand why it's continuing to come in so much under that cap, and does that reflect the fact that the Iraqis just don't really need those forces right now?
Well, you know, the cap is the maximum level. The commander will ensure that he's got the forces that he needs on the ground at the time. And that's what we have right now. So as we require additional forces will flow in. If we don't require a capability, then we don't require the capability. So there's no real trick to it. These are all, you know, and you're talking about you're talking about frankly minuscule numbers, you know, plus or minus 100 or two, very small numbers. But there's always, this is why we hesitate to, you know, get into these numbers games with you guys, because the numbers change daily. They change every single day. Somebody leaves, somebody comes. Somebody else comes, then tomorrow 2 people leave. This is a daily thing. So, you know, the commander has the forces that he requires for the operation that he's conducting. As we need more forces will come in. The FML, the force management level, is simply the upper end. It's not a requirement. We're not required to keep 44,082 or whatever the number is. We're not required to have that many. That's our upper limit of how many we're authorized to have. So it's our management level. So if we don't need that many today, then we don't have that many today. If somebody's got to, you know, if units got to leave or is rotating out, whatever the case, then those numbers are going to move a little bit. But there's no trick to it, other than, you know, having what you need when you need it. And right now, that's the case.
Next to Tolga Tanis.
Hi, Colonel. I want to go back to Manbij question, to Phil's question. What's the problem to defend Mare in terms of this, the airstrikes that you intensified over the last month? Even though, why the opposition groups on the ground are losing ground against ISAF?
Right, it's a tough fight in Mora. I think you broke up a little on me there. I think you asked me what's the problem in Mora, so that's the question I'm going to answer. It's a tough fight there. You have a determined enemy that wants to continue to gain ground, and it doesn't want to give up any ground. And you have opposition forces arrayed along a fairly large front that also want to gain some ground. And so that's what you're seeing. You see ground gained one day, and in some cases lost the next day. So this is a continuing, you know, process, and you know, this is a little bit of a change from where it was 6 months ago. 6 months ago, what you had was a very static line with almost no movement at all. What you see now, probably in January, February timeframe, the opposition forces made a push and gained quite a bit of ground along the Mora line, and we were talking about that a lot when it was happening. But what they have really was hold forces. So they've struggled to hold the territory that they were able to take back in the January-February timeframe. And so now what you've seen, now that kind of static sort of World War I, you know, line of the Mora line kind of became much more fluid after that initial push back in January-February timeframe. What you're seeing now is that line kind of continuing to fluctuate as the various forces there jockey for position.
I have a more specific question then. Do you have any difficulty to find the groups that you can cooperate with on the ground? Because there are 2 separate groups, as far as we know, in Mare. One, the groups who are working with CIA under Article 50, and the other groups who are working with DOD under Article 10. Are you able to contact with the groups who are working with CIA under Article 50?
Well, it is difficult to find groups along the Mora line because we don't have anyone there. But this is something that we're continuing to work, and we will continue to work it.
Phil, you have a follow-up? No, that's a questions. Okay, I'll come back to you. How about Nancy Youssef?
Hi, Steve. I wanted to ask you about Fallujah. We've seen reports recently of starvation of civilians there, and now with these attacks on Baghdad and a perception among some that some of these attackers are coming from Fallujah, is there any increased talk amongst the Iraqi government and in their communications with the U.S. military about going into Fallujah before Mosul? Is that a realistic prospect? Can you give us a sense in terms of where operations against Fallujah fit into the broader picture?
Right. Yeah, Fallujah. We've seen a lot of these reports too. I think some of the press reporting maybe indicate a situation that's worse than it is. The UN reporting that I've looked at certainly indicates that there are growing problems, that food is becoming scarce, and that people who want to leave can't. But you also see some reporting here in the local press and other areas that indicate that it's a legitimate humanitarian crisis with starvation. So it's difficult to know exactly where on that spectrum Fallujah falls, but regardless, certainly there is suffering there. And let's keep in mind that that's suffering that's there because of ISIL, right? Let's not ever forget that point. But on Fallujah specifically, we have seen the Iraqi security forces begin to chip away at Fallujah. In fact, Fallujah is now generally surrounded by Iraqi security forces. Elements of 3 different divisions, the 1st, the 6th, and the 7th, are positioned to the north, all around Fallujah. And we have seen maneuver, but it's been in very small bites. Yesterday, I think it was 340 meters that Iraqi security forces were able to gain. That's a very small number, obviously. But this is a tough city. This is the very first city that ISIL gained control of. So ISIL's been there for more than 2 years. So they are dug in deep. So this is a tough nut for us to crack here. This is a tough nut for the Iraqis to crack. I think the Iraqis are aware. I am confident that the Iraqis are aware that they need to liberate Fallujah. Where it falls into the sequence, Fallujah before Mosul, Fallujah after Mosul, is unclear. But the Iraqis are working at Fallujah right now. Like I said, they've got it surrounded. They are pressuring it. But they haven't been able to make a real move in there to start clearing it yet. So this is going to continue to be something that we watch. We know that the Iraqis have attempted on several occasions to open up humanitarian corridors to allow some of the civilians to come out. Those have met with generally not much success. ISIL has done things like set up snipers to cover down on those corridors to kill people as they're trying to get out. So that's really discouraged their use. So it's a difficult problem. But I guess to come full circle, Nancy, and really answer your question, our sense is that the Iraqis certainly understand that Fallujah does need to be liberated. You do see some reporting that the Iraqis are ignoring it or whatever the case. I don't think that's the case. I think that they know that Fallujah has got to go, has got to be liberated.
I understand why they wouldn't do Fallujah first before Mosul. What's sort of the plus and minus of Fallujah first versus Mosul first? If they're already surrounding the city and it's closer to Baghdad and it's smaller, wouldn't it be a natural or logical to do the Fallujah operation first?
Well, from a military perspective, Fallujah doesn't have much impact on Mosul. So, you don't need to liberate Fallujah in order to get to Mosul. Unlike, say, Beiji. You have to get Beiji before you get to Mosul. Has to happen. Sinjar. You got to get Sinjar before you get to Mosul because that's the main line of communication. So, but Fallujah doesn't really have any tactical influence on Mosul. So then it becomes a political decision, right? This becomes a decision that, is made at the political level. There is no military reason to liberate Fallujah now, to answer your question. Now, That said, Fallujah clearly has some military influence on Baghdad, right? It is, it's close proximity to Baghdad. We don't know where these truck bombs came from. We don't know if they came out of Fallujah or not. But certainly that's something that has to be brought into the calculus as well.
Next to Richard Sisk.
Yeah, hi, Colonel. Can you tell us what the situation is north and west of Ramadi, where there were reports of major counterattack by ISIS, killed a significant number of Iraqi troops? And how could this happen, given the progress reports we've gotten from you and others on the progress in Anbar province? How could this happen?
Yeah. Hey, Jeff, can you signal to Tom Maston maybe to turn the gain down a little bit? Because everybody's coming in really blown out. So I can barely, I wasn't able to hear any of that question.
Okay. We're sending the signal now. Tom, if you can hear that too.
Sorry,
Question.
Richard,
try again.
Okay, how do you catch me now, Steve?
Okay. No, we can't hear you either.
You coming through?
crystal clear now. I can hear you perfectly.
Replay. What can you tell us about the situation north and west of Ramadi? Reports of a major attack killed a significant number of Iraqi troops. And how could this happen, given all the reporting coming out from over there about ISIS being on the defensive, and especially the progress in Anbar province? How could this happen?
Right, there was an attack on Ramadi. It was a couple of truck bombs that came in, and it wasn't really in Ramadi city center. It was kind of off to the north. Well, there was one to the north and one to the south. Neither one of them was in Ramadi city center. It was kind of on the suburbs or even the exurbs of Ramadi. The Lake Tharthar region there's still pockets. It's still kind of a little bit of a support zone for the enemy, and so they are able to infiltrate. And this was you call it an attack. I would call it a terrorist, terrorist attack. It was less a military attack and more of a terrorist attack, right? It's almost similar to what we saw in Baghdad, right? It was truck bombs. In this case, it was truck bombs plus. It was truck bombs supported by some technicals. So truck bombs supported by infantry. Notable, certainly the attack caused casualties to the Iraqi military there, which is tragic. But all the attackers are dead now. It was an unsuccessful attack. And the Iraqi military didn't give up an inch of ground. So this is still a war, and there is still a legitimate enemy out there. Again, like I said, in this case, we know Lake Tharthar remains a support zone from where they're able to generate small bits of combat power and project it, in this case, into the kind of Ramadi suburbs. But it certainly is not really an indicator of anything other than what I just said, that there is still an enemy out there.
Colonel, can you speak to the overall impact of things like this? However you want to characterize what happened in Ramadi. We had the attack last week in Teleskov. The attacks going on in Baghdad. You had the unusual circumstance earlier this week of the White House almost rooting for the Russians and the Syrian regime to turn back ISIS from moving towards Palmyra again. How does this, are they showing more resilience than you've expected?
No, they're not showing more resilience than we expected. They are showing resilience, but resilience is to be expected. We've never underestimated this enemy, not for one moment. And we know that they remain capable of these raids and limited attacks mixed in with terrorist attacks. But again, from a military perspective, they have not been able to seize or gain a square inch of ground, and particularly in Iraq. They have not gained an inch in Iraq. They have conducted these raids. In almost every case, the raiders are wiped out or nearly wiped out. So, yeah, you're going to see. I mean, it's a war, so they're going to fight. But this doesn't mean that they're gaining strength. It doesn't mean that something's gone wrong. What this means is there's an enemy in Iraq that's got to be defeated. And this is what the Iraqis are working on right now.
Colonel, just one, if I could, please. We went round and round with General Valesky the other day about the Apaches, but you said they've not yet employed the Apaches in an offensive role. Is there such a thing as a defensive role? Basically, are the Apaches flying? Are they flying missions now?
Apache helicopters have been here since almost day one. They've been here for nearly 2 years, and they have flown missions, escorting VIPs who come in, etc. So, I mean, that's not changed.
Okay. Phil Stewart.
Steve, sorry, I just want to ask on a separate question. It's not exactly directly tied to the counter-ISIL fight, but the top Hezbollah commander in Syria was killed in an explosion, and I'm just sort of trying to find out what your assessment is of that on Hezbollah, which is one of the many actors in Syria that you have to kind of factor in when you're going through your planning. And then also, do you know anything about this strike?
Yeah, so I am aware of it. Phil, it's really too soon for us to assess right now what impact this is going to have. You are correct that Hezbollah is an actor on this stage and has been for some time. We know that they've suffered very heavy casualties over the last 2 or 3 years fighting in Syria as part of their efforts to back Bashar al-Assad. But in regards to this specific strike, who took it, and what the impact, what the downstream impact is going to be of losing this leader, it's simply too soon to tell.
The United States did not carry out this strike, obviously.
That is correct.
Barbara.
Just cleaning up one detail, you mentioned a couple of times the Iraqis have 50% of their forces dedicated to the defense of Baghdad. If you say 50%, can you tell us what the number is? How many troops?
Roughly half, maybe I should have said. And I don't have the troop numbers to hand. Probably not inappropriate for me to give out Iraqi troop strengths anyway, so even if I did have it, I wouldn't give it to you.
And on the Hezbollah guy, Target, if he wasn't on your strike list, do you know whose strike list he was on?
I do not know whose strike list he was on. We are not striking Hezbollah.
Okay, anybody else? All right, Steve, thank you very much for your time. We wish you a pleasant weekend.
Thank you very much. It's good seeing everyone. We'll see you next week.